So Adam, what are you seeing there?
Well, Megan, I'm sure it's pretty hard to hear me because we've got a lot of wind going. It kind of picks up and goes at a pretty fast at this point. In fact, it's kind of hard to stand on our 2 feet, especially when some of these gusts start going. I'll tell you, we haven't seen rain here in Savannah for about 30 minutes. When we woke up this morning, much of the area that we're staying in is without power as the storm moved in overnight, and that was obviously the big concern, was as the storm moved in and the outer bands of Hurricane Matthew began to hug the coastline, that happened to line up with high tide, and we did see a number of local roads flooded. In fact, it actually kept us from one of our hotels. The roads, we just had no way of getting to it. So as we were navigating around town, we did see a lot of that flooding. Now the rain seems to certainly have subsided. We haven't seen really any rain, Megan, for about an hour or so. However, the wind has certainly not let up at all. It goes through little bursts and peaks, and right now we're kind of in a lull. But every like this right here, it's hard to stand when that wind starts going. The good news is the tide is now moving out as this wind is moving in. The bad news is we have literally been battered here in Savannah for more than 24 straight hours now. So we'll continue to monitor any damage and cleanup as it becomes morning and more sunlight comes in. We'll have a better idea of the damage. We do know that thousands are without power, many of them along the Georgia coastline. We spent much of yesterday as well in South Carolina monitoring conditions there, and it appears that South Carolina seems to have gotten hit pretty hard by this hurricane with more than 7 inches of rain up there. Here in the Savannah area, we're talking about maybe 5 inches of rain coupled with that high storm surge and the high tide. That's why we're seeing some of the localized flooding. Nothing major, but we are seeing some localized flooding. And talking with police, they mentioned that there were a couple of emergencies, but nothing terribly severe. Right now, they're just trying to get through this storm, which, while it may have passed over and through Georgia's coastline, we're still feeling the outer band effects. And Megan, right now the story is certainly the wind. Back to you.
Adam, any idea on the cost of the storm cleanup?
You know, Mike, that's a great question. We asked the governor that very same thing. He says it's far too early, but it will quite literally be a very expensive storm. 200,000+ evacuating here in Savannah, and a lot of them have been allowed to return, but they're not all urged to return at once. Let me show you why. Okay, look at this big tree right here. Okay, this tree right here. Let me give you just an idea, frame of reference. 6 feet tall, at least 10 feet tall right up there, uprooted at the height of this storm. Walk with me this way. And this is just one residential neighborhood. And we've seen sites like this in so many different neighborhoods all around Savannah. You've got branches everywhere. And this is why the governor says if you don't have to come home today, don't. Tonight, evacuation orders lifted. Thousands who left to escape Hurricane Matthew now allowed to return home.
I want to thank all of your local officials.
The governor surveying damage along the coastline. At least 2 confirmed dead, total devastation still unknown.
The general observation by everyone who was in the tour was that we really have escaped some of the detriment that we perhaps had anticipated.
The National Guard.
That's Army trucks, ain't it?
Helping cleanup efforts.
I'm out of Charleston. We've got guys and girls up in Atlanta that drove down last night when we got called up, and so just trying to do whatever we can.
God bless y'all.
Our pleasure. Our pleasure.
God bless
yes, ma'am. Y'all have a good day.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Very welcome.
Cindy Hodges hadn't left her home since Friday.
Things started falling, and more started falling, and we just couldn't see, and we couldn't do anything about it.
Debris still scatters the streets, countless trees down across town. But tonight, signs of improvement. This road flooded with 4 feet of water, now dry as the coastline begins to rebuild. The warning from officials, though, it will take time.
We were blessed that we did not get hit with the Katrina, but we were very, very close. So we have a lot to be thankful for today.
Kim and Mike, that seems to be the message all across Georgia's coastline as we bring you back out live and you take one more look at just one neighborhood devastated by Hurricane Matthew. Crews will be back out tomorrow surveying the coastline, trying to find even more damage spread out. One area we have not physically been able to get to, Tybee Island and those separating islands right there, in part because the roads are all closed. They've been closed now for several days. The big question tonight for those who evacuated the islands, when can they return home? We might have a better answer for you tomorrow. Tonight, we're live in Savannah. I'm Adam Harding, CBS 46 News.
Adam, thank you.
Live in Savannah. Adam, what's it look like there?
Well, Megan, the cleanup work is now underway here on Georgia's coastline. We want to show you some of the damage that we're starting to see. We're right on East Bay Road, and as you walk outside, you see immediately there are tree limbs, tree branches everywhere you look. In fact, Charles, let's show them right down the street here. As far as the eye can see, the sidewalk is just covered in downed tree limbs. This, of course, the direct result of Hurricane Matthew that really tore through Georgia's coastline and Savannah here specifically. Let's walk over this way, Charles, a little bit because some really big pieces of tree down here. This area was hit particularly hard because you had high tide mixed at the same time as the storm was coming over Georgia's coastline. So what we're seeing right now, I mean, Megan, this is the potential here for some real serious damage if this were to come down on anyone who was walking nearby, anybody who was driving nearby, any homes or properties nearby. And it's really astounding when you see, because Savannah's so well known, you know this, Megan, so well known for these beautiful trees here. But when these storms come through and the winds are whipping as hard as we have seen them, this is the aftermath. And this is it's truly pretty surreal to see in person. And right now we have seen police, first responders, Georgia Power crews start making their way through. I talked with an officer yesterday, and she was telling me essentially that unless it was a major critical emergency, first responders were not going to be out last night simply because the storm was just way too powerful. So they had to wait until today. And now that it's not sunny outside, right, but it's starting to get lighter outside. In fact, Charles, right over the street, right over there, okay? This is the Staybridge Suites, okay? We're seeing a lot of this everywhere you look, okay? You've got the boards on the windows, and then we come down on the street and look at the damage right here on the street. Look at what has fallen just as a result in this one small stretch of road. So, Megan, the cleanup work here is what's important to highlight. The cleanup work is now beginning. We have to now wait and see, essentially, to see how much damage really Savannah took as a result of this hurricane. We know police and firefighters are now out in the communities. We'll go out there, too, and survey some of the damage. And a lot of people are waking up in the dark, ourselves included. Upwards of 200,000 customers reporting they don't have power. We do know a lot of people heeded the governor's advice and the mayor's advice. They got out of town. This is one of the mandatory evacuation spots. So that's the good news. But the bad news is there's a lot of cleanup. So we'll, of course, have to see just how bad it really was. But from our vantage point, what we're noticing right now, Megan, tons of downed trees, not a whole lot of rain, and not a whole lot of wind, except for a couple of bursts here and there that actually do almost push you off your feet. So we'll send it back to you as we continue to look into the storm aftermath.
Adam, what are you seeing?
And Sharon, we're getting pelted, quite frankly, as the hurricane begins to descend right here on the Georgia coast. We've been finding huge pieces of tree branches everywhere we've gone. In fact, we even saw some massive trees just blocking some major roadways as we drove from South Carolina down here to the Georgia coast. Tonight, the concern, flooding could be about an hour or two, as you mentioned, away. And because of the storm surge, Sharon, it could be incredibly dangerous. And Sharon and Ben, we have seen some of that flooding localized here as the storm continues to move in. Some roadways are just washed out right now and impassable. Reports tonight, upwards of 2,500 people in South Carolina seeking shelter, more than 300,000 evacuating as Hurricane Matthew moves in. Live in Savannah tonight, I'm Adam Harding, CBS 46 News Night Team.
CBS 46's Adam Harding is joining us live in Savannah now with a look at what people are waking up to there today. Adam.
It's still really a mess, Megan. In fact, we're finding a lot of downed trees everywhere we go. And I want to show you this because this kind of shows you, and right in the heart of downtown Savannah, it shows you how powerful the storm was. I mean, look right here, okay? We've got a down traffic light on the sidewalk here blown over by the storm. Charles, bring them right over here to your left, right over here. I mean, pieces of metal have just gone flying. And then, can we show them across the street? I know it's kind of hard to see. We're finding stuff like this everywhere we go. I mean, we found concrete facades of building. We found metal roofs of buildings just thrown everywhere. Now, much of the city is waking up this morning to day 2 of cleanup, and we're expecting an update from officials later on today. And some big questions that we have for them. One of them is the power concern. As you mentioned, 200,000 at the height of the storm waking up yesterday without power. We know about 100,000 across the state got power back, ourselves included, but a lot of people are still waking up in the dark here. And we have to learn a little bit more about at least those 2 deaths that are being linked to Hurricane Matthew at the height of the storm. We had heard from police yesterday there could maybe a 3rd fatality of a man who may have drowned when a roadway was just drenched in water. There was about 4 feet of water. We found a car literally up to the roof line on just what would normally be a busy road. It is still rain-soaked because of Hurricane Matthew. And then, of course, the question if you evacuated this area, when can you return? Chatham County officials haven't really said yet when they think those families who try to get away from the storm before the hurricane hit, when they can return. We know parts of 16 are opening back up. Okay, and the city is trying to resume back to normal. The problem is you had a lot of people, about 75% of the county had evacuated Thursday and Friday. 75% all can't come back at the same time. So what they'll be doing, we understand, is kind of systematically and systemically letting people back in slowly but surely. The question, though, is how do you kind of decide? So as we go through the city and we see all of this storm debris, this damage, in fact, Charles, bring them right over here. I mean, everywhere you look, it's not a whole lot of damage here, right? But it's just a mess. Okay, and it's got to get cleaned up. And look right over here. I mean, we've got tree branches and tree limbs falling everywhere. And Megan, you'll see sites like this no matter where you go here in Savannah. And you can see even some businesses are still boarded up. We'll show you right over there to my left. Charles, you're right. Some businesses are still boarded up. So, Megan, the bottom line here is there's a lot of cleanup. This storm has proven deadly, with at least 2 deaths right now being linked to Hurricane Matthew. We expect to learn more about that later today. We expect to learn more about this power situation that has upset a lot of residents here in Savannah. I can tell you, Megan, yesterday when we were driving around town, gas, incredibly hard to find. Food for much of the day was incredibly hard to find. There was one grocery store in the city opened up yesterday. We went in there and the line stretched out the door in some parts. So a lot of people who hunkered down and they decided they were going to stay here in Savannah during this storm, maybe having a little bit of regret because Savannah was hit pretty hard. Today, we will go out and survey more storm damage, so I invite everyone to follow us on our social media pages. We'll try to update you guys as quickly as we can. And, of course, we have a lot of questions about when people can return here now that Hurricane Matthew has moved along. Megan, back to you. And Sharon and Ben, we bring you back out live here to Hilton Head. I want to show you these trees because, look, this is how powerful some of these gusts are going. These trees are whipping in the wind here, and it's pushing all of that rain sideways. So it's kind of a triple threat right now. We've got rain, we've got wind, and we've got this big tidal concern, this flood concern as the storm continues to move. I do want to pass along South Carolina, one of 4 states obviously under a state of emergency, but it could be one of the hardest hits as the eye wall of this storm could have a direct impact on this state. Reporting live, I'm Adam Harding, CBS 46 News. And Tracy, right now we're starting to see a lot of this heavy rain and heavy wind come whipping in, but we're still hours ahead of what's expected to be the worst time when Hurricane Matthew hits. In fact, we're looking at the ocean right now in the waves, and look at this guy right here. Not very smart right here. Clearly not heeding the advice of the governor and other state officials here in South Carolina. People have been told to evacuate this area as this storm moves in. This is a pretty powerful storm, and we're still, I'd say, a good 7 or 8 hours from when it's expected to get even worse, because we're expecting around a midnight 1 a.m., as Jim was talking about, high tide, and that's when we could see that storm surge really start to wreak havoc here in parts of South Carolina. And on the coast here, it's pretty quiet, all things considered. And everybody's kind of under the assumption that it's going to get progressively worse as the evening continues. A short time ago, I spoke with a woman. Her family couldn't get very far. They tried to evacuate. They wanted to get further inland. Problem was, they said there were no hotel rooms. Well, a lot of people, we understand from talking to some folks here, they say it would appear that most people are taking that advice and they're getting out of South Carolina. You can see the wind kind of pick up. I have to tell you, though, frankly, we're talking about bursts and gusts maybe in the 30 to 40 mile per hour zone right now. It's not terribly heavy. The rain is actually pretty warm, too, as we continue to look at these waves behind us on the beach. And again, we don't know why this guy is just getting so close to these waves right now. But high tide again expected in about 7 or 8 hours from now. That overnight is when things are supposed to get really bad here in South Carolina. This could be the one state where the eye wall actually touches down on land, right? This could be the state impacted potentially one of the hardest, because the heart of the storm, the way the storm appears to be curving right now, it could directly impact South Carolina. We'll be here. Reporting live, I'm Adam Harding, CBS 46 News. Good morning from hard-hit Savannah, where we are surveying the damage in the aftermath of Hurricane Matthew. Look at this massive tree that we found in one neighborhood toppled over. We are seeing sites like this all across Georgia's coastline. We've been here for a couple of days, and the sites are really astounding. In fact, look at this right here, okay? We're going to walk over and show you the roots of the tree. And to give you just an idea of how powerful this storm was, I'm about 6 feet tall. Look at how high this thing goes, right? Just ripped right off of the ground. Here's the update that you need to know today. People are now allowed to come back to Savannah. Let's walk this way. People are allowed to come back to Savannah. The governor announcing late yesterday that the evacuation order was lifted at about 5 o'clock. A lot of people, 200,000 people or more, evacuated Savannah in the days leading up to Hurricane Matthew. Many of them are allowed to come back now, but the question in front of officials is why rush it? And this is exactly why they're asking people, if you can delay coming back, do so, because there's a lot of cleanup left to be done here on Georgia's coastline. I mean, you look at this tree and this massive tree. We've seen sites like this at least 10 or 20 in neighboring areas. All around town, you'll find damage like this. Homes literally ripped in half in some cases because of falling tree limbs. And that's why when we spoke with officials yesterday here in Savannah, they really urged residents not to come back immediately if you don't have to. All of that said, a lot of people did want to come back. A lot of people do need to come back. The cleanup work will take some time. A couple of other questions that investigators and officials have yet to answer is, when can people who live on Tybee Island, when can they return? When, if you live on the Barrier Island, when can you return? They haven't yet given a concrete answer. We're also trying to figure out the total cost of this storm. We know there's a lot of damage. We know at least 2 people are dead as a result of this storm. We also know cleanup work tomorrow and today will continue. In Savannah, I'm Adam Harding, CBS 46 News.
CBS 46 reporter Adam Harding is on the ground in Savannah with a closer look at Matthew's aftermath.
Tonight, we are getting a clearer picture of just how devastating Hurricane Matthew was here in Savannah, with at least 2 deaths being linked to this powerful storm. And we're also surveying a lot of damage. In fact, look what we found right here, just in the main stretch of road here in downtown Savannah. This was a piece of a concrete building that came crumbling down, tumbling down at the height of this storm. Tonight, so many are in cleanup mode. Tonight, a look inside Hurricane Matthew. From heavy rain to howling wind, strong enough to almost knock us over. But every like this right here, it's hard to stand. And the devastating aftermath: a car trapped underwater, roadways now rivers. Much of the city is still without power.
We're alive. That's all that matters.
Karen Jordan's home and car, not so lucky.
About 4:12, we heard a crash. Everybody was asleep. But right before I went to sleep, I was worried about that tree.
I didn't know what happened, but it felt like the house shook a little bit and I heard a crash. I really think that I underestimated everything, because I thought like maybe a shelf fell, but when I actually looked out there, I was completely mind blown.
A number of homes destroyed.
It was a lot of rain and a lot of wind. After that, we heard a little boom. We saw the first tree in our neighborhood go down.
Renee Hill's neighborhood hit especially hard.
I feel so sad for them. I'm just praying that they can get it fixed and can make it habitable again really, really soon.
Police responding in force early Saturday as the cleanup begins. We found trees uprooted and toppled over.
Traffic lights blown down to the streets. Businesses boarded up as Matthew battered Georgia's coast.
And the damage here in Savannah is really everywhere. We found this massive chunk of metal literally crumbling, falling right on top of a sidewalk. That's how powerful this storm was earlier this morning. Now, there are two big questions here for people who live in and around Savannah. One is the power concern. Much of the city was in the dark because of Hurricane Matthew. A lot of the power has now been restored. The other question for those who evacuated, when can they return home? That question tonight is still a mystery. We are expecting an update sometime tomorrow from Chatham County officials. In Savannah, I'm Adam Harding, CBS 46 News 19.